What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode of Bleeding BNG. To give you a time step as I do for all of my episodes, today is Friday, May 2nd, 2025, and we're about a week removed from the 2025 NFL draft. So we can start to, get out of the rear view, stop looking at the rear view mirror, and we are done with the 2024 season and the 2025 offseason, and we can start looking through the windshield and look forward to the 2025 NFL regular season. But before I get too deep into this video, you already know what I'm going to say. Be sure to comment, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. On the road to 3,000 subscribers, and I can't do it without your help. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on, flood the comments so you're not missing any of this content. And let's get into today's video. So at the top of the video, I mentioned the NFL draft. And if you listen to any NFL pundits around the NFL media circles, myself included, not saying that I'm a pundit, of course, but I was regurgitating the same thought that, Washington prior to the draft, their biggest positional need was an edge rusher, a pass rusher, a defensive end. And they went throughout the 2025 entire duration of their draft with their 5 picks, and they didn't address what many pundits thought to be their biggest need. So what we're going to do today is that we see that there's still some holes on this roster. And if we look at, Lance Newmark, our assistant general manager, his post-draft press conference spiel, he said that there's still some things that they're looking to do to address some positions, to tinker with the roster throughout the offseason leading up to training camp and things of that nature. So what we're going to do today over here at Bleeding BNG, where you get the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis on your Washington Commanders, we're going to look at some potential vets that can be Washington Commanders in the 2025 season. Now, the 2025 Washington Commanders, they find themselves in a unique and an unusual situation where they're actually in the realm of contenders. You see, Rich Eisen yesterday in his way too early power rankings post-draft had us as the number 2 overall team in the NFL. So a lot of pundits, sports books and things of that nature have Washington or are deeming Washington to be contenders going into the 2025 season. And that's a feeling that's so unfamiliar to myself in my 29 years of existence, in my years that I've been a Washington football team, Redskin Commander fan. And it's such a positive thing to say. But with that unfamiliar territory comes unfamiliar moves that can be made, and comes unfamiliar attraction to your organization that you haven't had in such a long time. So these vets that we're going to mention today, the reason that they will be wanting to come to Washington is because they have a chance to ring chase with Washington. Don't listen to anybody that's hating on the burgundy and gold. Washington are title contenders for the 2025 season, and this isn't the Washington, football organization of years past during the Snyder era, where a lot of free agents were scoffing and turning up their nose to the Washington organization unless you were throwing in the biggest bag possible. We are actually we're the catch. The Washington Commanders are finally the catch. And, these, free agents are looking to marry, and they're looking to potentially, find the right fit for them to, ride off in the sunset in their career and chase some, final late career success. So we're going to talk about some potential veterans that can be Washington Commanders, or that would make sense for the Washington Commanders to entertain signing for the 2025 season. So we're going to mention 3 vets in today's episode. And if you guys are casuals, or if you guys are new to the channel or new to football and you don't know what I mean when I say vets, that's veterans. That's guys that spent multiple years in the league, and guys that have had, impact in the league, guys that have had the guys that we're going to talk about in today's episode. These are guys that have had names in the league, and these are guys that have been, all pro, Pro Bowl type players. And these are the guys that, they're in the position in their career where they've built enough cachet and such a high Q rating that they're able to ring chase, and they're able to, wait out the waves of free agency and wait out to the draft to potentially sign with the team to go ahead and, get that ring. And as I mentioned before, right off in the sunset for their career. So we're going to mention 3 names and then 2 honorable mention names that I'll give short spills on towards the end of the video. But as I mentioned, the edge rusher position. We mentioned the edge rusher position, and a lot of people still think that that's our biggest need going into the 2025 season. You know that if you checked into any of my Mock Draft Monday streams, or if you listen to any of my videos over here at Bleed to B&G over the course of the 2025 offseason, you know that I have been adamant on upgrading the running back position, and we haven't done that just yet. We drafted, 7th round pick Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, who very well may be improvement over the artist formerly known as B-Rob, Brian Keith Robinson. So the 2 positions that we're going to be talking about with the 3 bets that we're going to be talking about are the edge rusher position and the running back position. But not to bury the lead too much, I've already given you guys too much. Let's talk about the first free agent at hand. So the first free agent I have and I'm going to be talking about is a guy that actually, we're going to mention him because this is the only guy in the video that actually has like some, cold interest, or actually have guys in the NFL rumor mills, NFL media pundits and things of that nature, NFL talking heads talking about us actually having interest in. And the first name that we're going to mention in today's video is future Hall of Fame pass rusher, edge rusher, Von Miller. So before I even get into the spiel about Von Miller, something that's important to note is that the Commanders are hovering around $26 million remaining in cap space going into the 2025 season, but they haven't signed their draft class yet. So don't expect us to be having. We don't have $26 million to spend. It'll be around closer to that $20 million once we sign our entire rookie draft class, because them rookies, they ain't making no real cheddar just yet. They making real cheddar compared to the little old podcasters and little old me and you in the world, but in the scale to, the big, high-ranking superstars in the NFL. That's the reason why these guys are looking to get to these second contracts where they can make, quote-unquote, real money. So the Commanders have around, we're going to call it about $20 million left in remaining cap space. And just think about that and have that in the back of your mind as we mention these bets throughout this video. So first name I'm going to mention, as I mentioned before, was Von Miller. And Chad Forbes came out yesterday or 2 days ago and said that we actually have interest in Von Miller. He mentioned, he called us the Redskins, actually, which got a good chuckle out of many in the fan base. You see the reply say, who are the Redskins? But I will say this. A lot of people were kind of trying to play Chad Forbes, but I always harken back to this. Chad Forbes was the first NFL talking head, NFL media personality, whatever you want to call Chad Forbes. Chad Forbes was the first guy in the NFL circles to have Adam Peters coming to Washington. If you guys can remember, during the 2023 trade deadline, when we traded Chase Young to the San Francisco 49ers, when Chad Forbes was giving his analysis and his overview of that trade package, he said verbatim that he said future Washington Commanders GM Adam Peters did a sweetheart deal for his future organization. And that was before anybody mentioned an AP to DC anywhere. So when Chad Forbes is talking about the Washington football organization and the Washington Commanders, I tend to listen. So I believe it when he says that, the Commanders have interest in Von Miller. And I get it. I totally understand it, because we do have, I'm not going to say a gaping hole, but we do have, room for improvement at the edge rusher position. No matter what you think the coaching staff feels about the in-house talent, no matter what you think they think about, what Javon Kinlaw can do to this roster playing that elephant in position, or what you think they think about Dorrance Armstrong, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Cleveland Farrell, and things of that nature. We still can improve at the edge position, and bringing in a guy like Von Miller, who's a future Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl MVP, who is at the twilight of his career at 36 years old, I wouldn't scoff at this move at all. I wouldn't scoff at this move at all, depending on the price tag. And we're going to get into a potential contract when we get to the end of the spiel about Von Miller. This is a guy that has 129 and a half career sacks, coming off 6 sacks last season. And this is him bouncing back from a 2023 season where it looked like Von Miller might not have even played in 2024. He was that bad in 2023. He looked like a total shell of himself in 2023, coming off of an ACL injury that he suffered in his first year with the Buffalo Bills. But if you look at his 2023 stats, he almost had the same amount of stats as me out there with 0 sacks and 3 tackles. So if I was doing this video last year, I would have been like, hell no, nah. I don't want anything to do with Over the Hill Gang 3.0, 4.0, whatever you want to call it. But Von Miller quietly put himself together a solid season last year. Now, Von Miller, he's Dante Fowler Jr. in the run game at this point. He's pretty much non-existent in the run game, but he still has the capability of making splash plays every now and then. He's not going to do it snap in and snap out like he did 10 years ago when he was 26. But he's still Von Miller of old. He's still a number 2 overall pick, and he still shows flashes of that guy that had generational Ben coming out of Texas A&M. That guy that was a defensive player of the year caliber type player with his time in the Broncos. And shoot, even with, his time with the Los Angeles Rams, he was still taking over games and things of that nature. Do not expect that Von Miller. Do not expect that Von Miller. But if we can get him to come in here and be a pass rush specialist only, I think the sky's the limit for a potential Von Miller signing to the Washington Commanders. And I'm going to go out and say this now. All of these vets that I mentioned and all of these potential signings that I mentioned in today's video, to me, are potentially low-risk, high-reward signings. And Von Miller is another low-risk, high-reward signings because this isn't a guy that, I don't believe that his ego has ever been too big to, come in and have that designated pass rusher role of things of that nature. And this is a guy that can come in and teach the young guys that you might, or you think that the coaching staffs might have, uber faith in. Can you imagine a guy like Javonte Jean-Baptiste learning from a guy like Von Miller, learning pass rush moves, learning hand usage and things of that nature from a guy like Von Miller? And then this is bringing in or going along with the theme of last year when you bring in established vets that have had success in the league. We saw what the impact of a guy like Zach Ertz and a guy like Bobby Wagner have done. Well, guess what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Von Miller has arguably been a better player in his NFL career than both of those guys. It's a damn sure fact that, with Zach Ertz. And it's a toss-up between Von Miller and Bobby Wagner. And I might give the slight edge to Von Miller, to be quite honest. So if you could get another, Super Bowl, a guy with Super Bowl pedigree into your room, and if you're looking at a potential contract for Von Miller, this is a guy that's made nearly $200 million in career earnings. He's sitting at $92 million in career earning. So I don't think that he'll be looking to break the bank. So if you can bring him in at like a 1-year deal with a $3.5 million base salary with incentives that can push him to $5 to $5.5 million, I think this is a guy that's, you can put incentives in there that if we make the Super Bowl, if he gets a certain amount of sacks, if we get a motivated Von Miller, kind of like what we were talking about with the likes of Deebo Samuel, he can give us, do I go out on a limb and say that he can give you the 10.5 sack production that Dante Fowler gave you last year? Because while he only had 6 last year, we know Dan Quinn, one thing that he knows how to do is scheme up edge pressure. That's in Dan Quinn's, that's the one feather that he has in his cap out of all feathers. That's his ultimate joker. That's his big joker is, manufacturing edge pressure. And I still think that a guy like Von Miller that might be needing a cane walking into the locker room at age 36, I still think I'll go out on a limb and say that I'm going to argue that he's still a better overall pass rusher than a guy like Dante Fowler. And we saw the way that Dan Quinn unlocked Dante Fowler last season. So the first thing that I mentioned, the first vet that I wouldn't mind being a potential signing and becoming a Washington Commander in 2025 is Von Miller. So the next name that I'm going to mention is staying with the edge rushers, staying with the defensive end, staying with the pass rushers, and that's Zadarius Smith. So I haven't heard a lot of, going scouring the social media, scouring the internet. I haven't heard Zadarius Smith's name attached to Washington a lot, but his name has been popular in the community amongst the fans. This is a guy that is a pass rusher as well, totaling 69 career sacks with 9 last year. So I'm gonna say Zadarius Smith is a more productive overall player than Von Miller at this stage in their careers. This is a guy that's 6'4", 270 pounds. So he's always been a more all-around type edge. Even though he has had big sack seasons, he's always been a better run defender than what a guy like Von Miller has. But he never had that, 20 sack potential like a guy like Von Miller had in his prime. But Zadarius Smith is 3 years younger. He'll be going into his age 33 season. His birthday is in the first week of September, so he'll be turning 33 essentially in the first week of the regular season. And if you would ask me, what guy would I rather have between a guy like Von Miller and a guy like Zadarius Smith? It's honestly like it's like splitting hairs, to be quite honest with you, because while I love what Zadarius Smith was when he was with, the Green Bay Packers and his time with the Minnesota Vikings, but he spent time with 2 franchises last year, with the Cleveland Browns at the beginning of the year. Then he finished up the year with the Detroit Lions, who ultimately released him at the end of this season prior to the 2025 free agency period. But even though he had those 9 sacks last year and he was more productive, he outpaced Von Miller by 3 sacks last year. I can't get out the back of my mind that the Detroit Lions brought him in once Aiden Hutchinson suffered a season-ending injury. They brought him in to do essentially what we'll be looking for him to do this season, and he didn't answer the bell. He was essentially non-existent in big games, and we saw with a first-hand point of view in that divisional playoff game against the Washington Commanders with Jaden Daniels put the NFL league on notice. Zadarius Smith, I don't know if he recorded a stat in that game. Do y'all remember Zadarius Smith playing in that game? Because I don't. So while I love what he was, I've loved what he's done over the course of his career, and this is a guy that's been a Pro Bowl. Not sure if he's had any All Pros, but he's a Pro Bowl caliber player, consistent as well. Zadarius Smith has had a hell of a career over the number of franchises that he's had. But the Lions brought him in to essentially ring chase like we're going to be doing this season, or potentially be doing this season, and he didn't answer the bell. So who's to say that he's going to do it 12 months later when he's another year older? Do we have that much faith in our coaches? Do we think that our coaching staff is that much better than every other coaching staff in the league? Do we think that Daryl Tapp is going to get something out of him and that Dan Campbell and that coaching staff didn't get? I'm not sure. But I'll be a fool to not say that Zadarius Smith will be an upgrade, or he'll give improvement to that room. He'll be a nice, solid depth rotational piece in that room. And he gives you something different than a Von Miller, as I mentioned. While he coming into the room, he'll have the most pass rushing pedigree out of anybody in the roster. He doesn't necessarily have to have that designated pass rusher role that a guy like Von Miller has to have at this age of his career, because I still think that he's pretty solid in the run game. And that's something that he did fairly well early in the season, last season with the Cleveland Browns. So the Detroit Lions released him because he was set to make $9 million this year. Their GM, Brad Holmes, has mentioned while they didn't want to bring him back and they simply couldn't afford him at that price tag, they wouldn't mind bringing him back at a reduced rate. So a potential contract, these are all Bleeding B&G's projections and Bleeding B&G models. A potential contract for Zadarius Smith, in my eyes, will look like something like a 1-year, $5 million base with incentives to push that to about $6.5 to $7 million. Same incentives that you would give a guy like Von Miller if we make the NFC Championship game, if we make the Super Bowl, to push these guys to ring chase, to push these guys to be or to find their younger selves again and be impact players for Washington in 2025. And the last name that I'm going to mention and I'm going to do a long spill on is a running back. is a running back, and that's running back Nick Chubb. That's running back Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb has been a hell of a player over the course of his career. He's going into his age 29 season. He won't turn 30 until late in the season in November. And this is a guy that's totaled almost 7,000 rushing yards in his career. But he is coming off of a career low 3.3 yards per carry last year. But Jerome Ford re-signed today with the Cleveland Browns, and they drafted two running backs in Quishon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. So I think that Nick Chubb's time with the Cleveland Browns is over. I think his days are done with the Cleveland Browns, and I totally get it from the Cleveland Browns point of view. This is a guy that's coming off a broken foot. And that's just his most recent injury. This is after tearing damn near every ligament in his knee in the 2023 season. It kind of went under the radar, but he broke his foot within the last couple of weeks of last season to go along with a slew of other injuries that he's accumulated over the course of his career. He's had major knee injuries dating back to his time at Georgia. He's had shoulder injuries and things of that nature. And when I think about Nick Chubb at this point in his career, I think about like the game of operation, because he seems to like break every bone in his body, but he seems to come back time and time again and gives his best effort. We've seen the workout videos that he's put out this year. He's back at squatting over 600 pounds. And I know that doesn't mean his thing, but he's put out videos of him having field work as well. And I'm not here to say that he looks like the Nick Chubb of 2021 or he looks like the Nick Chubb of 2020. I'm not here to say that. I'm not here to fool my subscribers and fool my supporters by saying that. This is not bringing in Nick Chubb in 2025. You'll be a fool to think that you're getting the Nick Chubb of 2019. Do not expect that. Do not expect that. But I'm here to say on record that Nick Chubb with a peg leg. No, scratch that. No, you can say that. Nick Chubb with a peg leg. But even better than that, Nick Chubb with no legs is better than Brian Robinson Jr. Nick Chubb with no shoulders and no feet are better than Brian Robinson Jr. Debate your mother. Debate your mother. I know we got people in the Washington fan base that think Brian Robinson Jr. should be a shoo-in for RB1 because he's overcome a shooting. Shout out to him. Amazing person. Love his story. But if you want to sit here and debate me that even with the number of injuries, you can put Nick Chubb, you can wrap Nick Chubb like a fucking mummy in all gauze tape, and he might go out there in the gauze tape and average more yards per carry than Brian Robinson Jr. I don't care how injured Nick Chubb is. And we can still improve in that running back room. Yes, we signed we drafted Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt with our final pick in the 7th round of the NFL draft. And you guys know, based off my last video, there's nobody in the community higher on Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt than me. Nobody told you in the community about Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt earlier than me, before me. I'm super high on this guy. And I think that he can come, and I've gone on record and said that he can come take snaps away from Brian by the bye week. And I don't even know when the bye week is. The bye week can be in week 2. JCM can come compete for snaps with Brian Robinson by week 2. I think he's more talented than Brian Robinson Jr. But if we just look at history and if we look at hit rates, you'll be delusional, and I might be delusional. I know I just went on that long spill. That might have been a long delusional spill. But you got to temper expectations a little bit, because you sound a little crazy if you think that Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt is going to come in here and be the bell cow running back taking 25 to 30 carries a game. I think he has the talent to come be RB1. But as I mentioned at the top of this video, that running back room still has ways to go. It still has ways to go, and it has a lot of room left where you can improve. Yeah, it's crowded, but you can't tell me that a guy like Nick Chubb isn't going to be an upgrade, no matter how injured he is, over some of the running backs in that room. I just mentioned Brian. You can't tell me he's not going to be an upgrade over Chris Rodriguez. He's younger than Austin Eckler. And while he's had a lot of bodily injuries, his brain isn't fried like Austin Eckler, which we've come to know. Concussions are a lot more serious than a lot of these bodily injuries. When it comes to, the lifespan of, NFL career, when, a certain player suffers these type of injuries. But I'm sitting here to tell you right now, I'm a huge advocate. For potentially signing Nick Chubb and bringing him into this running back room. Because guess what? As I mentioned before, all these moves that I mentioned in this video are low risk, high reward. And this one might be the lowest of the risk and the highest of the rewards. Because guess what? If it doesn't pan out, you still got 4 running backs in your running back room right now that we can trot out again. You can still try Brian out there again for the good old fan story. We still got Austin Eckler. We still got JCM. We still got Chris Rodriguez. Shit, Jeremy McNichols still on the roster. But you're not going to tell me any of those guys I just named is more talented than Nick Chubb. I've been out on a limb on this channel a couple years ago now by saying that Nick Chubb is probably the best, most natural runner in the NFL when healthy. And I'll take a 10% healthy Nick Chubb over Brian Robinson Jr. The last 2 names that I wanted to mention, and don't laugh me out for this one, because I know this name is an enigma in the Washington community, and this is a polarizing name in the Washington community. But if Brandon Scherff has some juice left in the tank, I would potentially take a look at that one. It would be a nice feel-good Hallmark story. That seems like we're all about good vibes over here in Washington now. He could come ring chase with his original franchise that drafted him. And he can potentially be the starting, right guard, his natural position, while a guy like Sam Cosmi is recovering from his injury. Because I'm expecting Sam Cosmi to be placed on the PUP list before the season or going into the season. You're not going to tell me that Andrew Wiley is better than Brandon Scherff. I'm going to have a hard time believing that. I watch a lot of football. I'm going to have a hard time to believing that Andrew Wiley is better than Brandon Scherff. Brandon Scherff can have the greatest of beards. I saw Brandon Scherff block, and I saw Andrew Wiley block. He's going to have a hell of a fall off to be on the same level below Andrew Wiley. And the last name that I wanted to mention was Jalen Ramsey. Just had to throw it out there because he's a Jalen. So, no, just had to throw it out there, though, because I probably would have been interested in Jalen Ramsey prior to the draft, but I'm not interested in him anymore because I think bringing in a guy like Jalen Ramsey would potentially stagnate or stunt the development of Trey Amos, because I think that he's your future boundary corner with Mikey Sanders potentially sliding back into the slot. And to be 100% honest with you, I'm done with down there 30-year-old cornerbacks that can't run anymore. They leave their hamstrings left on the training table, and they're supposed to be on the field. So that'll do it with this video. Let me know what you think about these guys that I mentioned in this video. Are there any potential guys that I haven't mentioned as veterans that you guys are looking that can provide a potential impact into Washington? Flood the comment section, hit subscribe. Check out the podcast if you're listening on audio-only platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating, leave a review. That's how we finesse these algorithms so that when you search at anything Washington Commanders, Bleeding B&D is that #1 content hub that pops up in your search bar. As always, if you're not following us on social media, what are you doing? What are you doing? At Bleeding B&G, BLEEDING, B&G. That's our Instagram handle. Our X handle is spelled a tad bit different. That's BLEEDIN, B&G. So there's only one G in our X handle. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's video. I'll be back sooner than soon. Mock schedule episode coming back this week. So make sure you tap into the channel so you don't miss a thing. I'll check in on y'all on the flip side.